T-minus
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome in. Let me get the comments pulled up so I can keep track of everything as they come around. But I figured today I'll just do a bit of a live stream talking about the recent pullbacks that we're seeing. Honestly, nothing particularly too bad as far as we've seen so far. I do have it pulled up so we can kind of start going through that as well. But honestly, it hasn't been anything too terrible. I mean, obviously it's crypto, so we're going to see things like this. But if you've been around for, let's say, the last 18 months, you've seen probably 3 or 4 occasions worse than something like this. And so we've also seen some pretty nice moves back to the upside. So some natural sell-offs, I think, is entirely reasonable and even to be expected. So yeah, anyway, that's kind of where we're at right now. I think we'll go through, we'll look at some of the coins that we like to talk about. I think in the video specifically, we're going to be talking about XRP, ICP, and Zebec Network for 3 completely different reasons. They're both kind of sitting in unique spots. I'm sure there's other cryptos sitting in similar spots to each of them respectively, but I figured that they would be good to talk about because each of the 3 of them are kind of in different spots for different reasons, and I think could be impacted in different ways by some of these outcomes. So yeah, that's what we're going to be going through, taking a quick look at today. Mikey, Paul, Vikey, how's it going? It's good to see everybody. I also will be monitoring the chat, at least as good as I can, or as well as I can, whatever that word would be in English. But I'll be monitoring the chat and trying to keep up with things as you guys are coming in and chatting and all that type of good stuff. But first off, let me get my screen shared. I probably should have done this before, but that's okay. All righty. Cool. Yep, got this going. We'll bring that back in a second. Paul, to be clear, thank you for the reminder, Paul. I am not anybody's financial advisor. I am just here just here talking, sharing my opinions. I've got all the fancy disclaimers and stuff in the description below, so you can check those out as well. And yeah, we'll go from there. But let's see. We're getting no, we're not. You're getting opinions. That's what you're getting today is opinions. But yeah, I think I'm going to try and do this probably every Thursday, kind of around the same time, roughly. Start to get a schedule to it. I know that some of you guys have been wanting some more like live stream type of stuff. So I think I'm going to try and stick to kind of this like hour time slot on Thursdays. I think that's probably what works best for me. I might kind of mess with it and see kind of what works best for others as well. And just kind of see what works for the most people. But at least so far, while I'm getting into the habit, this is the most convenient for me right now. So I think we'll just kind of stick with that for a little while. Which of these coins are you the most bullish on? That is a great question. I think short answer would be ICP, but we will talk about that more here in a second. If you look at the ICP price chart, you might think I'm nuts for saying that, which honestly, I'm not going to fight you on because the ICP price chart has been pretty wild so far. But I do think that the moves that we've seen from Caffeine AI and potentially how that launch could go is why I'm very bullish. I think if the launch goes and we don't really see anything happening, then that would be, at least for me, a point at which I would personally be looking to maybe reassess my strategy, at least in the short term. I think in the long term, it probably doesn't change anything, but in the short term, that's something that I would probably be looking to reassess a little bit. So you hold all of them? Good. Yeah, I hold all of them as well too. So that's also good. But some of them like XRP, I don't really have like a long-term hold bag. I just kind of trade in and out of it. So that's kind of where I'm at with that one. And then Zebec, I actually did just start a position the other day after I made that video. So I started a position there, and then ICP I've been in for months and months and months now. So I don't even know when I first got into that one. Alrighty, so let's pull this up, and we'll do this for right now just so people can see. But So yeah, I mean, this is basically what we're working with today. Everything's down a decent chunk. We have things like, if we're looking like XRP specifically, down just under 5%, ICP down also just under 5%. Zebec is very small, so I think we'd have to dig through a couple more pages to find it. But I think it's down a decent percent as well, especially since we saw such a large pump coming from that yesterday. So we can see here kind of between like 5 to like 10%, with some of the others being a little bit higher. White Rock has been one that's been just kind of consistently running. It's also been pretty volatile as well. So this is one that's kind of the main outlier here. We have a couple, super minor ones here and there, but overall, pretty much a standard pullback day in the world of crypto. So we'll start taking a look at XRP first, because XRP I think is the one that it probably remains in the best position. So we'll start there. This is the SUI chart. We'll have to move this. This is from my video earlier today that I made. Okay, cool. So we have the XRP chart. Let's pull this up and we can start discussing it a little bit. And then we'll move over to ICP and Zebec, and we'll talk about kind of why this matters. So I guess let's start there. So why this matters is for a couple of different reasons. First off, we'll take a look at Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, we had seen kind of two things happen in quick succession. One was a good thing, the other is the bad thing. So the first thing that we saw kind of in quick succession here is we saw a decent bit of support and resistance kind of building up at this level here. You can see it's more of a zone rather than a line, because you can see some of these don't touch, some of these also don't touch, but kind of between this like 106 to like probably even down here to like the 105. This whole range has been a pretty strong level of liquidity here. Now we quickly kind of broke below it, and we're also following this trend line as well. We can see the trend line we'd been following for a couple of days here. We quickly broke through this, moved up, which is of course a good thing. But then now what we're seeing is a bit of a dip here down to the downside. We do appear to maybe be holding this level of support right now, but this is essentially kind of like a breakout that's since been rejected a little bit. And we've fallen back into this zone of high liquidity. Now, not necessarily a bad thing because we haven't broken through it, but it is also a little bit challenging, because if we do break through it, then of course, we could see a little bit more of a protracted kind of drawdown like we saw but essentially between like January and when was this, like early May, early April. So that's kind of, what we run the risk of depending on what happens up here. We are also potentially seeing, maybe another top similar to what we another double top, kind of similar to what we saw here. So that's another thing that could be potentially an issue there. So that's kind of what we're looking at with the market. And of course, we do know the Bitcoin does kind of move everything else. So if we go and we look at XRP specifically, now we'll get started here. XRP, I would say, is in the best of all of the positions that we're going to be talking about today. The key reason why here, let me actually just zoom this a decent chunk. Okay, this is why. So it's gone and it's done about a 4x. Actually, it was about a 6x from bottom to top here. So it did about a 6x in the span of like a month, which is insane. Now, if we go look at much of the rest of the chart, and actually, let me go just take a quick look here at total 2. So if we go here and we look at total 2, you'll see kind of exactly that, right? So this is what we were talking about last live stream, but we can kind of zoom in a little bit here and let's clean some of this up. So we'll get rid of this, we'll get rid of this. But what we saw last, kind of last pump is we saw this nice little move back to the upside. And then if you look, this was essentially before the US election. Back here in like early April, we actually had gotten to the same points, actually wicked down even lower than where we started. So basically, all of the alts that we saw essentially gave everything back on kind of a whole scope between November and April. Now, of course, we saw this massive pump. Things did great. Well, if we look at XRP, that is not the case at all, which means XRP has essentially almost 6x. It stayed here at the lows of about 4x. I guess it dipped down here a little bit to about a 3x. But the lowest that it got down to was essentially 3x above where we started in November. If that's not like, if that's not strong, I don't know what else to tell you guys. That to me is about as strong as it gets, particularly when you think the rest of the market had given all of its gains back. And XRP was just sitting up only 3x with highs of being, up over 6x, coming up on 7x here. So really, really impressive stuff that we've seen from XRP. And if we go in and we zoom in here, we can see pretty clearly what's going on here. This is a multi-months long level of consolidation here. We're sitting pretty decently on this level of support. Obviously, it's not perfect. You can see some wicks down here and there, see this kind of momentary break that we saw, but it's pretty clear to see that we've got a decent level of, or a decent zone of liquidity in this range. And we are getting to the point of this wedge. Now, usually when we get to the point of the wedge like this, we are going to be breaking one direction or the other. Given kind of the strength that we've seen from XRP, it could realistically be that we see a break back to the upside. There's a lot of things on the macro perspective that could indicate that we could see something potentially like this. And so of all the alts, I think XRP remains in the strongest position. Now, the important thing to understand and the important thing to note here, XRP is also the biggest. So we've seen it essentially 7x bottom to top, 3x at its lowest point. That means, it still has the most gains already secured. So the remaining upside is probably going to be the most limited, especially given the fact that it's already the fourth largest crypto, right? So that's also another thing that's going to be very, very important to consider here. But hopefully you guys can see with XRP that this is definitely the strongest of the alts that we've kind of come across so far. So with the kind of recent pullback within the crypto space, I don't actually think that this is super concerning for XRP. I mean, we are getting closer to this key level of support here. So if we do actually have a bit of a more protracted pullback and we don't see some of this kind of chopping around here, we could risk falling out of this kind of like level, or this little like essentially like descending wedge that we have here. Or I guess it's kind of like a flat wedge. But we could risk falling out and then it, kind of starting to give back some of these gains because the structure has been broken. So that would be a little bit of a difficult thing to see. But overall, relatively speaking, I think it's in the best position. And I think it's the one that's 100% held up the best kind of relative to the rest of the alt market. The rest of the alt market has kind of been beat up pretty hard. And Bitcoin really has been the one that's done kind of the best over the course of the past year, but XRP also doing very, very well all the same. So we will move into ICP next, and we can explain kind of why it's in a different position fundamentally from XRP, and then why both of those are in a different fundamental position from Zebec Network as well. Let's see. ETH is also holding decently. White Rock gives mantra vibes. Yeah, that's fair. ETH, yeah. ETH is holding decently. On a more macro time frame, though, we can see that ETH has essentially fluctuated between like 2K and 4K. So that is one that also hasn't done fairly well in like a midterm perspective, but in a very short-term perspective, I think it has done all right. It's done a little bit of that recovery that I think a lot of us were hoping for, which is good. Then we've got Sean here. Let's see. Beware long-term investors buy the dips and ignore the noise, as should short-term and midterm. Saying beware is a term to instill panic and fear. Shouldn't label it like that just for views. I appreciate the feedback, Sean. I think you have to, and this is an important point to bring out, because I think what you're saying makes sense, because if you are long-term, I think you can hold, but that doesn't mean that you hold everything long-term that it's going to be good. And not everybody here is just buying and holding for long-term, right? There are a lot of people who trade short-term, and it's particularly if you do leverage trading. Now, again, I've espoused the risks of leverage trading. I do it myself, but of course, you need to be very, very careful. If you are doing that, doesn't really make a lot of sense to say, just buy and hold and go away. That's probably not going to work on a short-term time scale. So I understand kind of what you're saying here. I don't think it's instilling panic or fear. I think you should beware. If you're not aware, then I don't know exactly what you're doing actively involved in the crypto space. But anyway, that's kind of my thoughts there. But yes, I do understand what you're saying. If you don't like it, you can leave. That's fine too. So let's move along, and we will continue with ICP, because ICP is moving a little bit differently for a whole bunch of different reasons. So Obviously, if we look at ICP, we are seeing a couple of different things here. Obviously, first one, we saw that really nice move into early 2024. We've seen it do pretty much just bad. I don't know if there's any other way to put it other than bad, since, but essentially we saw that top in about March of 2024. And then we kind of saw a lower high here again in like December of 2024 as well. Since then, it's basically been down only. And with this, I mean, the price is kind of like, we'll call it the inverse XRP, right? It does quite poorly, but then it also does, like, it sells off harder and it doesn't gain as much when things rebound. And so, it's not doing quite well from that perspective. But the important thing to note here with ICP is they have, in my opinion, again, this could be rose-colored glasses here, so you obviously need to kind of take it for what it's worth. But in my opinion, they have a very, very, very important event coming up here shortly, which is the launch of Caffeine AI. Caffeine AI, I think, could be massive for both ICP as well as the crypto space as a whole. And so what we're seeing is that's actually going to be launching, I think, in about 2.5 or 3 weeks at this point. Really exciting stuff. I'm very interested to see kind of how it ends up going. But the problem is, if we could enter into a bit more of a protracted pullback, that may, again, help continue to drag on the ICP price. So that's, of course, very, very important to understand here, is that, even though we could have some good news, a lot of the hype and the speculation could ultimately be kind of tamped down on by an otherwise bit of a difficult market. So something to think about there. Again, in the long term, I don't think it matters at all, but in the short to medium term, it could impact things somewhat volatilely in ways that we may not expect or we may not understand. So a good example here is, and again, you have to understand there is market making shenanigans going on every point of the way as well, because you could see kind of in this range, this was kind of that hype leading up to the actual announcement itself. And then we saw that really like quick, short, and pretty violent pull back to the downside. And then, of course, we've had several really strong days of moving back to the upside. And then, of course, we are starting to see it pull back with the rest of the market. So it's important to understand here, again, we do have really, really strong news coming for ICP, but depending on how the rest of the market goes, I kind of use it as like a force multiplier, right? So if the force in the market is generally negative, then ICP may get some level of positive impact from it, but it's not going to be super positive, right? It might be limited positive. But also, if the market is going really well, and then we have this type of good news, it could be, like I said, like a force multiplier, right? So 100% pumps could turn into 2, 3, 4, 500% pumps because there's so much more optimism and things like that in the market. So again, a lot of this is talking about timing the market rather than the actual fundamental value of what's going on here. If ICP has a strong release, and if if Caffeine AI has a strong release, and if Caffeine AI fundamentally is a good project that does well and adds value to the world, we don't have to worry. So again, this is very, very kind of short-term look, like short-term perspectives here. We will also look at the total too after we go over Zebec as well. But I want to kind of talk about these three because hopefully you're seeing how they're in very different positions. So, XRP, of course, doing very, very well, essentially looking to hold some key levels of support and remain kind of like the flag bearer of the altcoins, I guess we could say. ICP in a little bit of a different situation where I think we would be looking for the positive news in a positive environment to be kind of a force multiplier on the price appreciation of ICP. Of course, if the market is bad, it's not the end of the world, but it would, potentially kind of in the short term limit some of the upside that we could see from ICP. So something, something just to think about there. Before we move on to Zebec, I'll catch up on some of the comments here. So we are in the best time. Just hold and ignore the noise. Arrow just went up, and great content news for. Thank you, Latif. Hopefully I pronounced your name correctly. Arrow's really nice. Actually, I do hold a bag of Arrow. I should talk about it here a little bit. I keep a kind of a somewhat loose eye on the Arrow chart. So I've always got an eye watching for that one. But that one is another really good one. I think the base ecosystem as a whole, I think if ETH continues to do well, it's going to be very, very good for the base ecosystem. So let's see, being aware is not bad with a short. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the way I view it. yes, maybe some things could be happening in the short term that are bad, but it's not like because we've seen a little bit of a dip, I'm going to go sell all of my Bitcoin or anything. Like that would be stupid. So I think just being aware and being caught up with what's going on in the market is important. So let's see. I know Simple is dumping after that huge rally, but maybe you can give some quick thoughts on it. Yeah, I'll actually do that after we go over Zebec, and maybe I'll do that before we get into the total too. But I think that's a good idea. We can go over Simple as well. If Trump lost to Harris, do you think the bull run would have played out as previous cycles? Honestly, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. I don't know, and I don't necessarily care. And I say that in the way of like, obviously, maybe things could have happened differently. Maybe it all would have happened the same. Maybe it would have been better. Maybe it would have been worse. Who knows for sure, right? I do think that it could have been maybe a little bit opposite. So if Harris would have won, in my opinion, it's probably very likely that we would have not gotten the November, December, January rally that we did. But we also may not have gotten the January, February, March, April sell-off that we did either. So I think, maybe it could have been inverted in the sense that like in the November, December, January time, it got a little more rough. And then in February, March, April onward, it got better. But ultimately kind of, crypto doesn't fundamentally care who the president is. Crypto cares about liquidity, optimism in the market, stability, a lot of that type of stuff. Now, obviously, some of the things that have been done with the recent administration are not particularly great for stability, but they're also very, very good from like a regulatory perspective, which is the exact opposite of what was happening in the prior administration, of which Harris was a part of. Now, whether she would have continued that or not, we can leave that up to speculation. She kind of said that she would have, but again, I'm not here to get into that type of stuff. But I think overall, I'm not sure. I don't think that the cycle, I don't think it doesn't matter to me who would have won. I don't think it would have played out like previous cycles. And the reason why I say that is because there were so many people talking about the previous cycles, right? And usually the reason the previous cycles played out as they did, well, they both kind of played out coincidentally at the same time, but in my opinion, for completely different reasons. So one of the different reasons that we noticed with the previous cycle, or I guess the first cycle, so 2017, is nobody expected that. I think that was just genuinely a blind side to everybody. In 2021, it was kind of a blind side to everybody, but also kind of wasn't at the same time, right? Because you had the GameStop thing going on. You had the like Wall Street bet stuff going on. It was COVID, so everybody was kind of like locked down and not really doing anything. There was a lot of these types of things happening that impacted the market in a different way, at just kind of coincidentally at the same time. So I think the 4-year cycle was kind of a bait, to be honest, for this most recent cycle, just because it usually never plays out as people expect. Okay, cool. So let's move along, and we will talk about Zebec, the last one here, and then we will go talk about some of the others. So Zebec is a little bit different because of, well, so basically ICP and XRP are very much, hold on, I can't multitask apparently. Okay, so they're very much like the big boys or very large cryptos in the space, right? Obviously, XRP is number 4. ICP, I believe, is in the 30s, like high 30s, somewhere in there. Or I guess low 30s, like 31, 32, 33, something like that is what I mean. But Zebec is completely different in the sense that it's very, very, very small, and therefore it's super volatile. So of course, over the past several days, we have seen a really, really nice move back to the upside. We have seen a pretty strong, or not a pretty strong, but like a decently sized pullback. We've seen this level of support before. So again, we're actually putting in some volume at the support, which is really good. I think from the strength of the project, this is a really, really good place to be. So this is something where, maybe I'll continue to DCA in a little bit, because I think when I got in yesterday, actually, it might have been around this same time frame as well. So, we can come back in and DCA a little bit more here. It would, potentially be my plan. I'll have to think about it a little bit more closely if that's something that I want to do. But overall, it's looking pretty decent. Obviously, the risk here, given that it is a small crypto, if we go into a long and protracted sell-off, it's very likely that we come back down to this range, which again would be another 50% sell-off. And then it's even possible that we go even further down into some of these lows down here. So that is always very possible, particularly with a small crypto, because again, the small cryptos are very, very volatile and very risky. So this is another one that, you know, I'm keeping a very close eye on, just because, as I mentioned, I have a video out, I think it was yesterday's video, if I remember correctly, where I talk about this network, why I'm interested in it, why I think it's cool, why I think it's valuable. This is the type of stuff that I like, because in my opinion, it has value long term, and they're actually building a real product using technology that crypto, or I guess, yeah, using technology that crypto enables and actually makes the world better because of it, right? That is ultimately what I'm looking for. Let me give another good example. Stable coins. I was actually just talking to somebody earlier about this today. Stable coins are a fantastic example. I think they're massively overlooked in the crypto space because you can't buy them and have number go up. I think is probably the main reason why we don't hear more about stable coins. But stable coins have far and away been the thing, the success of probably all of crypto so far. I mean, they've been an absolutely tremendous success. They're super, super valuable in multiple different ways. One, they make people a ton of money from like a business perspective, because essentially what you're doing is you're buying treasuries, which give you yield, and then you go give people cash, and people don't expect their cash to give them yield. So you essentially just take the arbitrage split, which is massively profitable, particularly since most of this is all done through smart contracts. For those of you who aren't aware, like Tether essentially makes the same amount of money, or the same amount of profit, I guess we should say, as BlackRock. The only difference, Tether has about 50 people, BlackRock has about 100,000, if I remember correctly. So, I mean, that's the type of thing that has just been like an absolutely resounding success. That's why everybody's trying to get a stable coin. I mean, there's a whole bunch of TradFi places trying to get stable coins. We obviously have USDC. The USDC IPO went absolutely wonderfully. I mean, that thing crushed. We've also got Ripple stablecoin and BlackRock stablecoin and DAI and all these other types of stablecoins. Everybody wants a stablecoin because they make a ton of money. So, you know, that's been the interesting thing. I don't know. I kind of went off on this rant about stablecoins and why they're good. Oh yeah, utility and crypto. But yeah, that's ultimately why I like Zebec as well, is because they're enabling something that otherwise wouldn't be possible, right? I mean, right now, the whole pay period situation runs every 2 weeks because there's the accounting for it. You actually have to process it, but you got to have the account thing. Your accounts all figured out. It's everything's done in ACHs and wires. So it takes 2 days for you to send your money to the payroll company, and then the payroll company does the direct deposits. It's all a hassle, right? But with crypto and with stable coins and with something like the Zebec network, you can essentially do all of this real time. Why would it not be possible to do a smart contract where I get paid every hour that I work? If I make $10 an hour, $10 gets deposited into my account every single hour. Why couldn't it be every minute? Why couldn't it be every second, right? I mean, there is a level in which this is possible. And that's why I like these types of things. Now, coming back to the recent pullback in the market here, we are seeing a little bit of a pullback here, which is totally fine. It's completely reasonable. But we could see, some pain coming back down to the downside if we do have a little bit more of a protracted sell-off here. So that's the thing that I would just say, make sure you're very clear on and make sure you're understanding, particularly if you are using or you're doing leverage trading. Leverage trading on small caps is unbelievably risky, especially if you like to do higher leverage, just because they can move so much, right? Yes, they can move 3x in the span of a couple days and Bitcoin can't, but they also can move down 70% in the span of a couple days, and Bitcoin, I guess, can, but it probably wouldn't, right? So hopefully you understand kind of my meaning there. That is why I think, Zebec is in a different range from some of the others, because the percentages get so much bigger. Of course, XRP can go down. Of course, ICP can go down. But Zebec, realistically, I mean, we're looking at the next level of support being a 50% drop. That's probably not going to be the case with a lot of these larger altcoins. So all three of these are kind of sitting in different buckets, but they're all kind of suffering from the same risk, which is what if we see crypto flip and we start to enter into a little bit stronger of a pullback rather than just a momentary dip. Now, I haven't seen anything that indicates that. Again, we'll kind of wrap this up by finishing where we started, which is Bitcoin. We haven't seen anything quite yet that indicates that, because if we go back, you can see we're starting to dip a little bit into here, but we have this whole range. And actually, let me change this so you guys can kind of see the range I'm talking about. Like, this is kind of the whole range that we're seeing where Bitcoin has a bunch of liquidity. So you can see we're about halfway through it right now in the current candle. So it's real, like it's entirely realistic or even possible that we go back, come back down to this 105 range, and then maybe do another bounce. Maybe we break right on through it and we come back down to like the 100,000 range. Maybe we break on through that and come back down to the 93. Maybe we come all the way back down here to like the 74, 75K that we saw just back at the beginning of April. It's possible. So of course, anything is possible, but that is why, seeing this flip is a little bit of a concern, but we can, of course, if we sit in, put in some volume here and then come back up, we could maybe get, it could be all right. Because right now we have seen a higher low, which isn't great, but we also could potentially be seeing a higher high, but we have put in a lower low from if we look at this low. So for example, if we were to come back down and we were to essentially have something like this, and we were to put in a low here about, let's say 99.5, I mean, realistically, we're looking like we are in a downtrend, right? It's might not be a super steep downtrend like this one was, but it could be. Let me do the parallel channel here. But it could be something like that realistically, right? So, and, this might look familiar to some of you, which would be all the way back here in 2024. If you're looking at this, you probably saw something very similar to like that. I mean, we did this in 2024, right? Basically from March all the way up until we officially kind of broke out and retested here in October. So, I mean, it's very possible that we see something like this. And this was a 6-7 month long process for this to actually end up breaking out. And then, of course, we found the new highs that we're sitting up at right now. But this was a very long and protracted event that we could actually see happen up here. Again, no guarantees in life, but that's just something that I would kind of think about and consider. This is just kind of how I'm viewing it, at least right now. So obviously things will change with time and we will remain reactive to that, but that kind of remains one of the possible outcomes here. Alrighty, so let's see. Yeah, Zebec has a token unlock in 72 hours. The last 4 unlocks have resulted in a pump. It's actually interesting information, Jason. Usually when we see token unlocks, it results in a little bit of a dump. So if it does result in a pump, I think that would actually be a very positive thing for the Zebec network and just the chart overall. But yeah, I think that would be pretty interesting. And market maker want 100%. Yes, the market makers are always looking for free money. And that was something that I think it was a comment that I had received. And this is not to kind of like call this person out, but I had essentially done something like this. Let's just say it was that. And they had said something to the effect of like, oh, well, essentially if these wicks break your trend line. And like from a technical accounting or technical, not technical accounting, but like technical analysis type of perspective, maybe. But the thing that like my response to that is pretty much, I think if any wick breaks a trend line, I just don't agree with that at all, because we know that market makers can read charts same as we can, right? If I'm sitting here and being like, oh, this is a trend line. This is a trend line that's going to continue here. Like, look, we saw one here, 1, 2, another one here, another one here, another one here. We knew that people were thinking that this trend line could get broken, right? So maybe this breaks and people start placing longs and then they pull back down. This trend line comes up here, people start placing super, super tight shorts because they know, oh, we've hit the top of the trend line. I'm going to go 500x short Bitcoin. And then boom. Well, no, now it's going to go up just barely over the trend line because the market makers know where the money is. They're going to liquidate this type of stuff. So, I mean, maybe from a technical perspective, yes, this is sort of broken the trend line, but I just don't agree with that because market makers know where the money is. Like if they know, oh, the trend line's here, and if I push price to here, I'm going to go liquidate $100 million, they're going to do it. So that's kind of my opinion there. With kind of what we're seeing out of Bitcoin. So if you are interested, I will do a kind of a quick shill just before we continue on looking at simple total 2 and going on to maybe a quick Q&A. If you are interested in checking out BloFin, I am working with BloFin. It's less than 2 days on that limited time 15% deposit bonus. So if that is something you are interested in, feel free to check it out. I've just kind of recently started working with BloFin. It's been great so far. I've had some pretty positive reception toward BloFin. I think they do a lot of interesting things. Do copy trading if you're into that. I personally don't do too much with copy trading, but the grid bots and the trading bots I think are super cool. The demo trading I also think is fantastic if you're looking to essentially like just try your hand at leverage trading without exposing yourself to the dangers of leverage trading. They've got a lot of different options here, which I think are super cool. So if you are interested, just feel free to check that out. I've got the link in the description below. I also do have the link in the description to BTCC. That is only a 10% deposit bonus, at least for right now. So in my opinion, over the next 2 days, that 15% deposit bonus would kind of be the priority for me. But then after that, or if you have a preference towards BTCC, then, obviously feel free to do that. So let's go get back and let's move on to the total 2. We'll take a look at simple AI, and then we will also go with some questions after that. Vikey, I do see your question, so I'll get back to you there. The thing that I've been talking about for a couple of weeks now at this point is kind of like what we saw here for altcoins. We'd seen, so this is kind of the previous all-time high of altcoins up here. This was kind of like that liquidity zone. It was very clear to see here. I was saying we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. Whichever way we break is going to decide a lot of things. We, of course, broke down, and we have since not actually been able to get back up into this range. So from that perspective, we were correct in assessing that, this was going to be a pretty important spot. Now, we're kind of sitting in a similar situation right now, where we're also similarly stuck between a rock and a hard place. This is kind of the low point. This is kind of the high point. This is kind of the midpoint. We're kind of sitting at the midpoint right now. It appears that maybe we're bouncing off of it, which would be some relatively decent news. But again, we're continuing to see lower highs and lower lows. So it is a bit of a little bit of kind of like a descending channel here. So that's kind of what we're seeing out of total 2. Again, same type of thing. I don't think that we're actually going to have any realistic direction on the market until we see kind of one move or the other. I think if we break out of this, we probably enter a longer period of correction, kind of like what we saw here, potentially even getting down into this like sub $1 trillion range. If we get up into here, similarly, I actually don't think it's like amazing news. I think it's probably we just entered into the next zone. This right here, breaking this kind of $1.7 trillion mark, this, in my opinion, is where things start to get wild. And that is where, in my opinion, we would start to consider seeing something that looks like an alt season. Until we break this level, which at this point we're still about 50-ish% away from, I'm not getting too excited about anything with alts. I think we'll see relative rotations and things like that, but we're not going to see anything all too crazy coming out of alts until we start to see this. And of course, that this is kind of correlated with Bitcoin dominance. If this starts to pump, we will see Bitcoin dominance start to drop at least a little bit, assuming Bitcoin doesn't go up as quickly as alts do. So just something to think about that. Alrighty, let's see. I'm not ignoring you, Vikey. Just give me a second. We'll take a look at simple. Actually, let me actually get that sorted while I do answer your question, because I will pull this off for 1 second. So let's see. Any thoughts on the CPI and PPI data impacted them towards a potential rate cut? So I think really the thing that's happening, or the thing that's impacting the rate cut more than anything else right now, is actually not CPI, PPI. I think inflation has been relatively handled for the last little bit. The thing that I think people aren't paying attention to is it's the long end of the rate curve. And the long end of the rate curve is ultimately decided by the market. And the market right now is at least having some issues kind of determining where the US is going to be from like a solvency and from like a debt perspective over the next 10 years. Because these are usually kind of like 10-year like agreements that are like bonds that people are buying. And so right now the long end of the yield curve, or at least when I checked most recently, the long end of the yield curve was going up because I think people were probably getting a little skittish about what was to come. And so that is one of the things that we need to pay extra careful attention toward, is making sure that people, or that we understand what the rate curve, or the like long end of the rate curve, is doing. Right now, the short end of the rate curve, I think, is fine. Part of the reason that people cut rates is because we need to understand what we're actually fixing. And right now, we're not fixing anything too crazy, right? I mean, we're literally just fixing, like, yes, cost of living is high. If we cut rates, that would help. But then if we cut rates, what happens to, you know, some of the other things that are going on, and particularly the long end of the rate curve, it doesn't necessarily impact that too much. So I think that the inflation is going to be one thing, but it's going to be important to see kind of what happens after that. So anyway, let's go back to Simple AI. Hopefully that answered your question. I feel like my face looks a little fuzzy. I'll have to check that out. I don't know if this is being, I don't know. It feels like it's being weird. Anyway, we got Simple AI here. So Simple AI, we did a video about this. Also, I'm absolutely dying. I don't know if you guys are seeing me like start to sweat. Give me 1 second. I'm going to turn on a fan. All right, guys. Sorry, I'm back. I'm just absolutely cooking in here. It's the summer here, and I don't know why. I think, well, my office is hot because my computer's in here, and my computer puts off a decent chunk of heat, particularly when I'm streaming and stuff. So, and I also got the lights on me too. But yeah, so Simple AI looking honestly really good. We're starting to see a bounce here at what we probably could have fairly easily called as a support here. Whether we actually hold this level of support, it depends. But of course, you know, technical analysis on a small project such as this one is very, very almost impossible to do, just because it's a small project. Like if we look at the liquidity, liquidity is actually decent. Holder count. So one of the things I think, you know, since we're talking about these like micro cap coins, first off, not financial advice, do your own research. You know, I do actually, yes, also disclaimers. I do hold this coin. So yes, I am in fact pumping my own bags by talking about it, but that's not, you know, that's not the intention here. It's just to talk about it and talk about microcaps specifically. So of course, you know, I actually do also know the founder of Simple AI. That's part of the reason why I own it, is because I know him and I think he's a good guy. And I believe that he has the capability to execute. So I'm voting with my money is kind of generally how markets work. So anyway, the most important thing with small cap coins is kind of twofold. So first off, yes, seeing this type of structure, higher highs, higher lows, always a good thing. You know, this is very good to see. Market cap obviously continuously rising, which is another good thing to see. But the big thing to understand here is that we need to see, there's a couple of different things here. Volume still relatively low. So, you know, yes, even though prices moved up, you know, 300% from bottom to top here, that's done on a relatively low amount of volume. So a relatively low amount of volume will bring it right back down. So, you know, I don't get too excited by these types of pumps, particularly, you know, if we were seeing $5, $6, $10 million of volume and we were seeing something like this, super cool. But we're just not seeing that yet. And we wouldn't expect to. It's a super tiny project. You know, they need to keep delivering. You know, more people need to keep finding it, a lot of that type of stuff for it to be successful. The next thing that we need to see here is the holders. Oh, also, can you hear the fan in the background? Tell me if you can. If you can, I will turn it off and just cook. But the thing that I look at most importantly on these small projects is I look for increase in volume over time, and I look at increase in holders. So holders has gone up, I think, by about 100 or so just today. I would say that is a very good thing. 24-hour volume, I haven't been tracking that recently. I probably should start tracking it. I could also, I know that there's the indicators like kind of aggregate it, so I could do that too. But 24-hour volume is also very important. volatility is marginally important, but not really that important, particularly on small stuff. And then of course, obviously market cap's good, but it doesn't matter as much as good structure, which is what we are seeing so far. And then as well as holder count and volume growing. Those are the ones that are kind of the most important. So anyway, but yeah, overall, things looking quite nice in my mind for what we're seeing with simple AI. So we can see here, we got the top traders. What we got here? Yeah, some people not doing particularly well, which is interesting. But yeah, so I mean, we do have some people doing some pretty decent levels of trading here. We look at the holders, we can see kind of who all the top holders are. This one, I think this might be the dev wallet from what I can remember. I don't remember for sure or for certain though. And then, we could see here, honestly, like this is fairly well distributed. The fact that the top 5 holders, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we've got 3, 5, 8, 17, about 21% held between the top 5 holders. I mean, it's a decent chunk, but it's not insane. And this might be the dev wallet. I'm not 100% certain on this, but if that were the case and this is the dev wallet, and it's like locked or whatever, then obviously then it kind of turns into like these 5 being the top 5 that are like accessible wallets, right? And then this would be less than 10% off the top 5 holders for such a tiny coin. I think this is actually really, really impressive. So yeah, I think things are looking pretty good here overall. Time will tell. And frankly, kind of, this is a small coin, just like all the rest of the altcoins are small coins. What happens with Bitcoin is going to be very important. So, that will very much impact what we see here. So anyway, that's kind of what we got today. That's the Uniswap wallet. I don't know. I'll have to ask. I'll have to. It could be the Uniswap wallet. Yeah, I'd have to go through and like. It could be the Uniswap wallet though. That is a good call. And then yeah, I don't know. I'll ask my friend who runs the project to give me a breakdown of the top holders and stuff. And he would do that for sure. But yeah, hopefully that was helpful for you guys. That's kind of what I had to go over today, is just kind of talking about altcoins in the state of a market that's otherwise pulling back. If you guys have any questions, feel free to drop that in. Let's see, on Gecko Terminal it says so. Okay, perfect. Yeah. So in that case, like things are looking pretty decent, I would say. So and also, you can check the bubble maps as well. I actually did not check the bubble maps on stream, but the bubble maps will tell you if wallets are linked together. And then you actually can see that there is one wallet that's linked together. The cluster percentage is 46%. So that could be like the dev wallets or something like that. But that's also another thing that's important to understand here. But yeah, okay, yeah, the Uniswap wallet is 26%. Is what it looks like. I'm just clicking on through some of these other bubbles, but yeah, it does look like there is some wallets that are kind of all being split out. They might be the team wallets though, because I do know that is a thing. And the team, obviously all this stuff is on the website. But anyway, that's enough about Simple. I'm probably going to wrap it up here since we're kind of running up on an hour. If you guys have any questions, I can stick around for a couple minutes to discuss them. But otherwise, we'll wrap it up, and I'll get back to kind of carrying out my work day and making videos and doing all that other type of fun stuff. So, yeah, no, not a problem. Happy to kind of answer the questions that arise, all that type of stuff. Really appreciate, all your guys' support, like, subscribe, do all that type of fun stuff. It does obviously help me a bunch. Yeah, thank you as well, Mitch. Thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate all you guys that kind of spend the time to kind of hang out. So yeah, like, subscribe. You can check me out on X if you want. I've been trying to make a bit more of a concentrated push to grow my X as well. And then yeah, I'll see you guys next week, and we'll go from there. So cool. Thanks everybody.